We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, you have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style, and so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
Why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
This is a very interesting question.
The Bubb Report with Dr. Kellon Bubb. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the December 22nd edition of the Bubb Report. This is, of course, our final program for the year, and we're happy that you can join us for this one. Please do us a favor by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. And for those of you over on Facebook, kindly share this morning's live stream so that others can benefit from this very important conversation that we're about to have. I am, of course, your humble host, Dr. Kellon Bubb, and it has been my pleasure bringing very stirring and important episodes of the Bubb Report for you in 2024. We intend to do the same again next year in 2025. And for this week's editorial, we are going to take stock of our lives. Personal stock taking, if you will, as we come to the end of the year. Now, we're going to ask ourselves some very important questions to evaluate where we are and where we need to go. Of course, many people do vision boards at the end of the year. They also do resolutions at the start of the year. Vision boards also factor in to help people determine where they want to go in life. But I think it's also important as we come to the end of the year to take stock of the things that we need to do and ask ourselves some very important questions. Now, the first question that we need to ask ourselves is this: what contribution have we made to community? Now, one of the important questions to ask is this one. When I say community, it doesn't have to be your town or city. We are all residents of the global community. So maybe you have given your time to volunteering or donated some money to charity. Think about the ways in which you have contributed and ways in which you can continue to contribute in the future. I can proudly say that my maternal family is known for contributing to their communities. We are not only saying that we should be the change that we want to see in the world, but we are actually living that creed. Now, the second question is this: have you achieved your goals? This is another important question. And before you say that you've probably given up on some of your New Year's resolutions way back in March, if you look back, there are probably many ways that you might have moved closer to achieving those personal goals. Now, maybe you didn't quit smoking, but perhaps you cut down a little on the habit of smoking. Maybe you didn't lose all the weight you wanted to lose, but still lost some. Or maybe you got closer to achieving some other health objective. You should therefore congratulate yourself for these little victories, no matter how small. Now let's go on to the next objective. What you need to change in order to be where you want to be. Now, if you haven't achieved as much as you wanted in 2024, you might want to ask yourself why. Did you lose focus or motivation? What are the reasons you didn't achieve what you desired? And what do you need to do in order to change? Perhaps there are subtle changes you need to make, like getting up a little earlier to exercise or organizing things a little better so that you have more time to achieve that goal. Number 4, have you been true to yourself? This is an important question which we should ask ourselves all the time. Being true to yourself means doing things that you truly believe in and not listening to what others expect of you. It took me a long time to get to that goal, but I can assure you that I have gotten to that place where at this stage in my life, I honestly do not care what people have to say about me. Of course, I do care what people have to say about this program and ways in which we can improve. But with respect to my own personal life and the choices I make for myself, those choices are mine. And quite frankly, it's none of your business. And that should be your mantra, folks, going into 2025. Now, remember that this is your life to live, and you only get to live once. Number 5, have you done your best? Another question which can make you reflect on the year is whether or not you have done your best. This doesn't mean that you have to hang your head in shame as you realize that you could have done better. It just means that looking forward, you vow to use your past experiences to be the best that you can be in the future. And that is a lesson that I've also learned, in some respects, in many hard ways as well. Number 6, how can you be better at what you do? Now, I'm sure that there is something we all consistently ask ourselves, but thinking about how you can be better at what you do can be empowering. Perhaps there is a course you can go on to develop your current skills, or maybe you can find a mentor to help you to achieve a particular set of goals. Whatever it is, reflecting on the necessary steps you need to take in order to be better at what you do can be a great motivator. And finally, are you happy? And so we may ask ourselves, what is true happiness in any event? Now, philosophers and sages have been contemplating the nature of happiness for centuries. But evaluating what makes you happy and when you feel your happiest will ensure that you can bring more of the good stuff in your life every day. And of course, these are just a few questions that you may want to ask yourself as the year draws to a close. So grab a pen and a piece of paper, folks, and use these questions to evaluate the year and the coming months. Can you think of any more other important questions that you need to ask yourself? And of course, that is for you to fill in the blanks. Viewers and listeners, this is the Bubb Report. We'll be right back for the panel segment of the week. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347 777 9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. We thank you for staying with us. I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellan Bubb. Now, to ensure that unestablished government workers are to receive a pension payment other than what is expected from the National Insurance Scheme, the government of Grenada's proposed pension plan was passed before the lower house of Parliament last week. The Public Sector Employees Pension Fund Bill 2024 is expected to provide a pension or retirement savings plan for public sector employees who were previously not eligible for pension benefits under the established public service. The bill also allows statutory bodies to join the plan. Now, in debate on this particular pension plan, Prime Minister the Honorable Deacon Mitchell lauded the bill as a historic step forward and a bold initiative to put the interests of citizens first. However, some very salient and important questions remain. And here to make sense of the bill that was just passed in the lower house are Daisy Hazard, Public Relations Officer of the Public Workers Union, Attorney Jimmy Bristol, as well as economist Dr. Curlin Gilchrist, who previously sat on the Pension Review Committee in Grenada. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report for this very important conversation on pensions. And of course, Dr. Gilchrist, I want to begin with you, sir, as someone who sat on the Pensions Committee. And of course, we know that the Pensions Committee did a lot of consultative work. Now, in relation to the legislation that was passed and the work that you were done, that you were able to do on the committee, how much of the consultative process was seen in the actual legislation that was passed, or the suggestions from the consultation?
Good morning, and I know Mr. Azad would be listening to my response on that.
Yes.
I believe we had enough. We had enough consultations. I think from the beginning, we have attempted to get the TUC representative on the team. That didn't happen because they wanted certain assurances that whatever is being done would not interfere with the current, an existing pension. So we never got the any member from the TUC to be on the team. Nevertheless, we continued our discussion and dialogue with employees in the public sector, government employees, and we had a couple of consultations or dialogue, let me put it this way, with the public sector union. So I believe we have covered substantial discussion with all relevant stakeholders, and I think that forms a legitimate basis to see that we have consensus going forward on the bill. So I would make that my opening statement. But let me also say that the employer is trying to bring a benefit to employees. And I believe that I anticipate that the union really should come on board and discuss the parameters of the plan. Mm-hmm. And I say that the consultation we have had all around, we did not get substantive discussion on the parameters of the plan. No, pension have certain commonalities. Yeah, there are certain basic criteria and parameters of the pension plan. So that's basic. What we put forward is consistent with general features of pension plan. But I think, and I must commend the government for that, not because I give leadership to the process, but I'm saying that initiative to at least put in place a pension for at least 4,000 employees. I think that should be commendable. And I'm at loss why are we arguing about it still. I think it's a commendable initiative, and what the conversation should really be on looking at the elements of it and see how best you could calibrate that to ensure that on retirement, workers get a pension when combined with NIS pension that would not put them into poverty. So I'll leave that as my opening statement.
Absolutely. As the opening statement there, I do want to bring in Daisy Hazard here. Ms. Hazard, you're the Public Relations Officer, of course, of the Public Workers Union. And it's an honor to have you here as our last, this panel, you're our last guest for this year's Bubb Report airings that we're doing. But Ms. Hazard, you've heard Dr. Gilchrist here. He indicated that unions were invited on the table for consultation. Of course, I just want to make the point that we here on the Bubb Report, we held several programs in which this issue of pension was discussed. And of course, the union's argument, and I'm sure that would be your argument as well, and your contention, is that your invitation to the table was done in an ad hoc way and not done in a way as to give the union the leverage to negotiate what this outcome should look like. So I want you to speak to that, but also speak to, and of course we will get into the weeds, if you will, of that particular legislation, but speak to the what Dr. Gilchrist just said in respect of having a pension plan that for those 4,000 plus unestablished employees, that would be a benefit to them such that they would not have to exist in poverty, if you will.
Thank you, Dr. Bubb. Good morning, and it's the Christmas season, so Merry Christmas. It's the end of the year. I should be busy cleaning, but yes. This was a priority. We had to drop everything and ensure that our union was represented on your program this morning, because the content, what we are discussing here, is so important. It's so critically important to Grenada, not just today, but in perpetuity, into the future. It was so important that our union dropped it. And Dr. Gilchrist, good morning. It is very, very good that as a representative of the Public Workers Union, the union with the largest public sector worker body, we represent the largest number of public servants. So it's very, very good that I'm having a conversation with you finally, that our union is finally getting to have a conversation with you on pension reform. Unfortunately, it is after the fact, because we've seen a bill that went through 3 stages of Parliament and was passed on Friday. And I want to use a phrase that you just used here, that the conversation should be how best it can work so that workers can retire, not into poverty, but going home with a pension. But Dr. Gilchrist, you would appreciate that this conversation is happening now after we have had a bill that has been passed in the Parliament by our MPs. And our MPs in the Parliament make up the majority. So the question is this bill going to go through? Or is time going to be taken now to have the conversations that should have happened before? Now, let's make the position of the PWU very clear. Our mandate as a union is the benefit, betterment, social justice, and advancement of workers' rights. The Pension and Gratuity Act that was reinstated in Grenada in June of 2022 was not political work, but was the work, the back-breaking, hard work, sweat and tears of trade unionists, of the PWU, and every other union that represents public sector workers. So there is no other group, there is no other organization in this country, be it political or otherwise, that has taken on the fight, that has championed and sought justice for workers in Grenada, public workers, when it comes to pension and gratuity. Let's just put that on the table here today for clarity. So our interest is to ensure that all of our workers, all of our members, every single person who labor in the vineyard of public service in Grenada, when it is time to retire to go home, must go home with a suitable pension. That's our premise. Our contention is that as a union, as a sovereign union with a responsibility, a right, and the right to be able to discuss whatever pension reform should look like going forward for our members, we were not given that opportunity. The PWU is not the TUC. We do not speak on behalf of the TUC. We cannot speak on behalf of the TUC. We are a sovereign union, and when we were excluded out of the process, when we were not given the opportunity, we went before government, kneeling, supplicating, begging for months to have meaningful, not an hour here or there, by the way, but meaningful consultation on for the benefit of our workers. We were not given that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our contention, that's our premise.
And that is a contention. And of course, Mr. Bristol, I want to bring you, so
just to stick up, sorry, Dr. Bob, and just to stick a point here.
Go ahead quickly.
It's not that the PW wants to have a conversation for the sake of conversation. The members that we represent, they have there's unique qualities and characteristics that make up those members as different to any other workers within the public sector. And so therefore, if you're considering a pension for them, there must be little elements that has to be considered that only our union can truly speak to.
Mm-hmm. Attorney Bristol, of course, you have been at the forefront of constitutional issues in relation to pension in Grenada. There are several cases in which you were involved in on this matter. How does this particular bill chalk up or compare? And before we get into the weeds, as I said, in relation to the specific issues, the specific bones of contention here, how does this one chalk up to the other issues you've dealt with in the past?
Well, first, I want to address Dr. Gilchrist. Now, I notice he's an economist. Money can never trounce and trump and overtake and subsume constitutional rights. And that seems to be the talk. What it's going to cost, and it's going to cost, especially when it comes to these so-called contract workers. I say so-called because that's what it is. Now, on the consultation, from my perspective, because my perspective is a little different to the PWs, they're interested in the mechanics and of the scheme and how it works. I'm interested primarily in the legal aspect of it. And I just like to say, there's no consultation really required from anyone, really required as to the legal aspects, because the Constitution is there. Section 92, which is the pension rights, is there. And the several enactments are there. We all know that. And all the government had to do is to give effect to those bits of legislation. So even if, and I wouldn't think that the union will have too much to do with the constitutional aspect, except insofar as it concerns these so-called contract workers. Now, I know, and I only received a copy of the bill, I don't know, less than 14 days ago. It was sent to the Bar Association. And that, if they were seeking consultation, when it was ready to be tabled before Parliament, it's impossible for there to be any meaningful input by the Bar Association within that time. So I think that the notion of consultation is illusory and is a figment of someone's imagination.
Illusory. No. Yes, go ahead. Finish your point, and then I'll bring it back to this.
So I'd like my concern with this, given my, from my experience. Don't forget, I'm the one who did the case that resulted in the public workers obtaining their pension rights and being paid their pension, and so I'm quite familiar with the issue and with the constitutional issue. Now, and so in that regard, what bothers me really, apart from some very pathetic drafting in this bill, which leaves a lot to be desired, but the real nitty-gritty is Section 3 of the bill, and really who gets what based on Section 3. And that is because it refers to contract workers in several of the subsections, and it's not clear, and there are contradictory sections, subsections within Section 3. So it's not at all clear who's governed by the Act and what is the position with these so-called contract workers who are there at the moment, and what would their rights be, whether they fall under the existing pension legislation or they would go under the proposed legislation. So that's a very important matter because it deals with the Constitution. If you want me to go into it further, I will.
Yes, and we will. I want you to stick a pin here. But Dr. Gilchrist, in setting up the parameters for how the pension committee thought about proposing with this legislation, was there any consideration given to the current constitutional landscape, if you will, before proceeding with, or when thinking about having a pension scheme? Of course, you just mentioned the economic considerations for employees who, when they retire into poverty, and the argument is what they receive as a benefit from the national insurance scheme is not really viable, economically viable for them in this environment. So was any thought given to how this particular pension reform bill, this pension fund bill, would fit within the current infrastructure, constitutional infrastructure, if you will, if I'm making sense?
Thank you very much. Of course, I'm not a lawyer. I just had about 2 courses in law.
Yeah. So that's why we have an attorney here, sir.
Yes, but on a serious note,
yes,
I am not here to question the wisdom and the guidance from the cabinet. The cabinet did set up the committee and give it a particular mandate.
Okay.
The legal issues would have been taken into consideration. All right, you have a whole barrage of legal opinion that was given to the cabinet on that, and they took that decision. So I'm not worried. I have full confidence in the wisdom of the cabinet in making that decision to set up the committee. So that's a given. That's not my worry or the committee's worry. We are given a mandate on the assumption that these matters will be is taken care of.
Okay.
Right? So we dealt with the substance of in conjunction with the actuarial scientists, the substance of a pension plan, making sure that it's properly put together and that it is robust enough, to live through time and bring benefit to employees. Now, I just want to correct something Ms. Hazard said, because my last meeting with the union was a very good meeting. As a matter of fact, in that meeting, Mr. Bristol had 2 officers representing his law firm. In that meeting, the union concluded that was one of the best meetings. Yeah, and I even summarized that meeting by telling the union I'm happy that they agreed in principle to the pension reform. Of course, they had some caveat, not caveat, but they had some things that some prerequisites for support to the pension. But I firmly believe from all my meetings and engagement with the union and employees that there is support for it. All right. The union have some other issues that they want to deal with, such as pay and grade, which has to deal with other issues of the public service. But they have some, and I understand that. Okay, so I just want to correct Ms. Hazard. Our last meeting, and you could quote your president, he was very pleased with that meeting. He felt good about it because it was a frank meeting and we discussed the issues. As I keep saying, the union's position should have been that initiative by the employer, how best can they attend to the parameters to ensure there is a good deal for the public workers. And I think we didn't get much of that, okay? Although there are elements that are pretty standard. We didn't get much of that. But I firmly believe that what we have presented had enough discussion. The scientists have looked at it, the actuarial people have looked at it, we have done the numbers, I know it's not about economic, but at the same time, it's about welfare, economic welfare of the public officer on retirement. Constitutional issues, it's a given, and we move on that assumption. All right, and I leave that there. I don't want to get into that discussion. I leave that there. But our mandate was to come up with a pension plan.
Right, and of course, and the mandate also spoke to issues of sustainability and viability in relation to a non-contributory pension scheme, which speaks to established public servants. And I think this is where a bit of the confusion happens. But before we get to that, Sister Daisy, I want you to respond to Dr. Gilchrist. He's saying here that the last meeting that you held with the committee was a fruitful and productive one, and that the objections you're raising post the passage of the legislation was not brought up in that meeting.
Dr. Bubb,
so which is it?
You would forgive me for being very confused this morning, because from the Parliament of Grenada on Tuesday of this week, Wednesday of this week, the nation was told that unions refused to participate and consult. If my memory serves me right, and I'm a bit tired this morning, at the start of this program, Dr. Gilchrist alluded to non-participation of unions in the process. And I did say that we did have some conversation with government and representatives of government regarding pension reform, but it was never substantive. So yes, my president would have made those statements that Dr. Gilchrist is repeating this morning. My president has made those statements publicly. We have been making those statements publicly for the last year and a half. We are not averse as a union. We cannot be in discussing how we cover workers who are not presently covered. But have we been given the opportunity to fully ventilate and to discuss and to share our ideas? And the resounding answer is no. In fact, I was just looking through my email as we were sitting here this morning and looking at emails, a flurry of emails between July and August of this year, where we were planning with the DPA and the PS Lindona Marshall to have a whole day session, a one-day session, not 1 hour, not 1 hour and everybody's busy and picking up their bags to leave, but a session where we could fully ventilate this issue and look at it in all its moving parts. We were not given that opportunity as a sovereign union. And let's remember, we were not offered that opportunity by government. We foisted ourselves. We inserted ourselves into the process by repeatedly and consistently going before government. When we had that meeting, and I was not a part of it, that Dr. Gilchrist refers to with our lawyers, it was after our union wrote to the DPA, failed to secure any meetings at all. They would come to us and say, yes, the meeting is going to happen. It's going to happen today. Then it's pushed back to a week. And then after a while, it was not going to happen at all. Then our lawyers had to write a letter. That is how the attorneys that he referred to came into that meeting, because we had to go to the route of getting legal counsel to write to the DPA to say we have a right to be heard. So it was not an easy process or a seamless process. And it was not a process where our union was given the opportunity to fully and properly consult. But let's go back to the point that Dr. Jimmy Bristol is making. Our union also, part of our contention is that our hard work restored constitutional pensions in March 29 of 2022. The NDC administration came into office and paid pensions on the basis of a constitutionally restored pension. Now, 1958, I think it's section 91 thereabouts, I'm not the legal mind here, makes provision and provides room for changes in existing pension legislation. But it says to you that no new scheme put forward should be any less favorable to a worker. And furthermore, that a worker should have the right to choose which pension he wants to be covered under should there be another pension. Let us go a little further to elaborate on the point that Jimmy made. In the proposed pension bill that was passed, there is a preamble that refers to independent contractors working with government. Dr. Bubb, people of Grenada, no person who works with the government in a continuous manner, as described and articulated in our labor code, can be an independent contractor with government. To give some examples, an ambulance driver, an orderly, maids, cleaners, those are jobs that we will always need in Grenada, in those industries and in those sectors, and I'm specifically referring here to the health sector as an example. They can never be independent contractors. The previous administration, for decades, practiced that form of employment. The NDC administration in 2008 to 13 continued that unsavory practice. We see that practice now being fully utilized and utilized in the fullest way by this present administration. But if the laws of Grenada are to be observed, and if the constitutionality of Grenada is to be respected, you cannot refer properly to a worker who's working with government in the norm every day as a contractor or as a contracted employee. That's farcical. So what we're looking at here is that a bill was passed in the parliament on Wednesday, and in its content, in its entirety, in its framework, it is farcical. But Dr. Gilchrist said this morning that he's content that the cabinet understands all of it, and they have the good wisdom enough to decide whether or not they can change the constitution. In essence, that's what he said to us. Because if you go to parliament with a bill that seeks to change existing pension legislation, which is couched in the constitution, and it deviates away from the parameters that the constitution, that bill provides for, you are in effect attempting to change the constitution without a constitutional referendum to do so. And I don't think that any civic-minded Grenadian can sit by and say, let us give our parliamentarians the right and the authority to effect constitutional change from the parliament. That can't happen. So outside of even the arguments of the bill and how workers are going to be covered by a pension, that's another critical area that the union has been looking at. We're keeping our eye very, very clearly on that. Because once you begin to slide that way, where does it stop? So among our contentions, we do have a concern about the proposed bill or the bill that was passed not falling into the parameters that 1958 allows for any change that has to be made.
And let me bring back Dr. Gilchrist here, because I think one of the issues, and of course, as an economist, I'm sure, and this is why I brought you on the panel, and this has to do with the sustainability of the current non-contributory pension that exists for established workers. And Dr. Gilchrist, how does this particular legislation attempt to, I suppose, protect the public purse from what the actuaries have called a potential an unsustainably bankrupt scheme that exists for established workers?
Yeah, so that's economic argument. So you are correct, and the documentation is there, right?
Yes.
Even under the previous administration of the fiscal unsustainability of the current pension plan, the non-contributory one, that's clear.
And that is for the established workers, which has not been dealt with. Yes.
But I want to broaden the concept of Ms. Hazard here in the context of the labor market that exists now, that is very dynamic. Yeah. And what we have, government employing a number of different workers in different categories for different purposes. Yeah. So this is the reality of the job market. So, and government is willing and able and really desirous of taking care of their employees, irrespective of their categories, how you call them. So yes, you could have, whether independent, you have different categories of workers for different purposes. And this is the reality of the labor market as it exists. It's very dynamic. It's not static. So that understanding that the way the bill is crafted is to take care of all categories of government employees that are not established. All categories, irrespective of whether you're on contract, you're unestablished, you're temporary, whatever you are. Once you are not established, the bill takes care of you. Now, so based on the calculation, of course, what you would have coming into effect would be 2 pension schemes. Yeah, you have the existing one and you have the new one. So you got it 2. So initially, in terms of government fiscal burden, it would increase because you now have to make contribution to a new category of persons. So initially, you would have an increase. But what the actual scientists have projected in the long run, government expenditure for pension would decline. Yeah, so initially you may have a bump up as we introduce a new pension, but in the long run, it will be sustainable and manageable and decline, and give enough fiscal space for government to attend to other aspects of development of its people and its country. And most governments, as we speak, are now moving towards contributory pension scheme. Most governments are moving towards that. As I keep saying, I am hoping that the conversation should be the elements of this plan and how best we could make it work for the employees. It's a fact.
But Doctor,
wait.
Yes, go ahead. Yes.
No, okay, you go ahead.
No. I finish your train of thought. I never like cutting off people mid-sentence, but I wanted some clarification on something. But finish, please, and then I'll get to that clarification.
No, I cannot miss my train of thought. So you go ahead.
Yeah. No, but I think that the fundamental disagreement here, as perhaps being articulated by the union, is the idea that this particular scheme sort of resembles the Pension Disqualification Act that we had back during the revolution. And that here you have a situation again where you're having 2 different types of pension schemes, while at the same time you have a situation where government, yes, they're attempting to regularize those contract employees as well.
Yes, but let me quickly jump in. But remember, you only have 2 schemes initially.
Yes.
Going forward, you'll have the 2 pension schemes, right? But going forward, new entrants into the public service would be assigned to the new scheme. So eventually, maybe over about 50 years or so, you would not have any employees under the existence of the current pension scheme.
You mean the non-contributory pension scheme?
Yeah, about
the non-contributory one. Okay.
Because what would happen is that anybody being employed would fall under the new pension scheme.
Okay. Mr. Bristol, I want to bring you in here, Mr. Bristol, as the attorney here. So what I hear, the game here seems to be, let us eventually phase out the non-contributory pension scheme because it is unsustainable. Is that what you're hearing, Mr. Bristol?
Yeah, but that's fair enough. The government can introduce, under Section 92 of the Constitution, a new pension scheme. Now, and I don't like this word employee. The Constitution does not speak to employees. The government is trying to put a gloss on the Constitution. In fact, tantamount, I think, to amending the Constitution. It speaks of public officers. Okay, the public service, it does not speak of employees. Now, public officers are spoken to in 92, as defined by 111, what's a public officer, are entitled to a pension. So the existing ones, quite rightly, as Dr. Gilchrist said, you always, once you join, and that's the scheme that's in place, the 58, that's yours forever. Of course, it's burdensome to the government because it's non-contributory. So the government can introduce this proposed new scheme for people joining the public service, right? as public officers after that time. They can also add statutory bodies, and they could add anybody else in. But we are concerned here about the public officers, the public service, because that's what the Constitution speaks to, because pension is a right. Okay, now, so the selling of this new scheme to the public, from what I've just heard and what I've heard before, is that every employee is now going to get it, and those who aren't established are not going to get it, and so forth. The selling of this new thing is cost, okay? Because the government has to provide a pension scheme. And the issue here is, to whom does the existing pension regime apply, and to whom will the new one apply? And that's really Section 3 of the bill. Because the question of contract workers and employees, which is not a concept in the Constitution, is being utilized quite heavily. And it's confusing. I don't understand the wording because it's not very well drafted or thought out. And maybe I'm just not clever enough, but nevertheless, it is problematic. And we cannot get around
and Mr. Bristol, yes, I don't mean to cut you, but I will share part that specific section 3.
Let's look at section 3.
And we can examine the areas of that you are concerned about. I will go ahead and share that screen right now. And of course, as the learned attorney here, you can guide me.
Right. So section 3, subsection 1 is the application of the act. It says this act shall apply to A, all new public sector employees. Now, in the definition section, public sector employee, new public sector employees includes public officers. That's fine. But then we get some qualifications going forward. B, all public sector employees. There's no such thing in the Constitution. What are you talking about? You have, in the act, you have new public sector employees, which includes public officers, and then you have another definition, public sector employees. Okay? But under public sector employees, B2, have neither attained the age of 50 years nor been employed with the government for a period exceeding 50 years and are not eligible to receive a pension, gratuity, or other allowance in accordance with a relevant enactment. Now, I don't know to whom that is referring. It is not clear to whom that is referring. But more so, and again, it's referring to employees. So once we say that those employees do not include public officers, that's fine. But the question is, who is an employee? Because governments, from time immemorial, have been taking people outside of the public service, calling them employees on contract and not public officers. And that, if it's referring to those people, or any one of those people, then it's, in my view, it's unconstitutional. Once you're holding a public office, your appointment has to be via the Public Service Commission in accordance with Section 84(1) of the Constitution. And all of these contracts that have been used and kept confidential, I saw one or two recently, are questionable as to the efficacy and their constitutionality, because many of them purport to appoint public officers on contract by bodies, sometimes a cabinet secretary, sometimes a permanent secretary. I saw one with the Public Service Commission appointing, but they were appointing someone to an established post for a limited period with disciplinary proceedings and benefits outside of the Constitution, which is Section 92 pension, and the provisions and protections of the public service regulations, which have a disciplinary procedure set out. So these are the problems. Now, if you look at C, B131C, and all employees of the government, again, what's an employee of the government? Does that include public officers? Is it, who are currently employed? I know there's a definition section, but they talk about employees. because the government in its mind is treating those contract workers not as public sector workers, just because they choose to call them employees. But the Constitution defines who they are. So ordinary legislation cannot override the constitutional definition based on the facts, because whether you're a public officer is a factual concept. Okay? Do you hold a post within the public service? Once you hold a post in the public service, you're a public officer, and therefore your appointment, based on the Privy Council decisions and our own Court of Appeal, the 2024 decision just came out of Trinidad, Duray, D-H-W-R-A-Y, confirming Savarin and Williams, which was delivered by Chief Justice Flosack way back when, that a public office and appointment to a public office are two different things. There's the existence of the office, and since you are a public officer, you can only be appointed to that office by the Public Service Commission, part of the protective scheme to protect and insulate public officers as recognized by the Privy Council in Duray and the cases before, the purpose of the Public Service Commission. So it's not the appointment that makes you a public officer, you know. It is that you're holding a public office and therefore you must be appointed by the Public Service Commission. That's the way. But the government's been looking at it the other way, is the fact that you're appointed by someone other than the Public Service Commission, ipso facto, you're not a public officer, despite the fact that you're holding a post, let's say an established post within the public service. So C, 31C, all employees of the government, whatever they are, who are currently employed in the public service. Now look at that. They're admitting that people are employed, that this is referring to people employed in the public service. So prima facie, at first blush, they're public officers. At first blush. On a contractual basis. What does that mean? What type of contract? Now, let's say this. While appointments to the public service are carried out by, made by the Public Service Commission, the terms of your employment are set by the government. That's established by the Privy Council. That's not a difficulty, right? You can have contractual workers, but you cannot circumvent the protections of the Constitution under Section 84 by placing someone who is really holding a permanent post on a contract of a lasting duration, a contract of a definite period. The Constitution is being circumvented by utilizing this process. If someone is coming in on a temporary basis to fill a gap while someone is off sick on maternity leave, or there's a particular project to be carried out, which will take a year or two, that's fair enough. But where you have someone like nursing staff nurse category A, which is a permanent job, and you employ somebody on contract to fill that job, that's unconstitutional because it's attempting to circumvent Section 84 of the Constitution. So these employees, depending who they are, on a contractual basis are governed by this new legislation. So the contract workers that the government made this song and dance about, and that the previous administration tried to remove from the system, are by this bill being removed from the existing pension rights guaranteed by Section 92 of the Constitution by ordinary legislation, playing games with the English language. And that's what that section is, in my view. We do go to subsection 2. Provisions of this act shall not
subsection
apply.
2, yes, go ahead.
It's the other way about, shall not apply to those contract workers. But I don't know what that means. Because if the act shall not apply, what it should be simply that this act shall not, they said it in section 3, subsection 1. A, that's the whole thing. shall apply to all new public sector employees. That's the end of it. These caveats and these ifs and buts that they insert afterwards in the context of the Constitution make no sense. And it's only going to result in more litigation when we've just finished the litigation and the public officers were promised that those who were regularized would be regularized. So simply, the government has to bite the bullet, the financial bullet, put everybody in who's supposed to be in, and you don't need any of this verbiage here, and you make it very simple. You know, and then when they confuse it further in subsection 3 and saying for the avoidance of doubt, public officers who are eligible to receive a pension will get pension under the existing legislation. But eligible, and they're going to hang on that word, who are eligible to receive a pension. And they're going to say, because you're a contract employee, you're not eligible to receive a pension. So this is where the ambiguity right there. Who has been so employed prior to the date of Operation Act and is eligible to receive a pension, they fall under the existing legislation. Why put it in when you've got 3(1)(a), which says this act only applies to the new people coming in? Mm-hmm. Because they put 3(1)(b), c, d, and 2 and confused and muddy the waters, they have to say, oh, for the avoidance of doubt. But they've created more doubt because you have conflicting sections or subsections of the same section of the act. And they're going to say, well, what does eligible mean? So we are getting mired in opacity through the way this thing has been drafted. And I think it is driven by the desire, these legal drafting gymnastics, I would call it, are being driven by the desire to exclude so-called contract workers from the existing regime. So but you know, the thing is, as I said earlier, the government has to bite the bullet. They've met, like all governments since independence, they've met this Section 92 from 1974, because that's when we got our Constitution. They've met that there. When you meet an obligation, you have to carry out your obligation. And that's the end of it. Bite the bullet and move forward cleanly. I would advise against proceeding with this as it is drafted, to honor the obligations under the Constitution, the constitutional rights of public officers to be recognized as such, and to fit them in where they're supposed to be fit in. And those who are there right now, that they fall under the existing regime. Start afresh, truly, but do not go in half-hearted like this. It's not going to work. There's going to be a lot of litigation, and unnecessary so.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated.
Mm-hmm. Let me bring back the rest of the panel here. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard Attorney Bristol's examination of the legislation that was passed, his interpretation of it, his critical examination of it. As a programming note, we did invite the Attorney General, Senator the Honorable Claudia Joseph, to appear on this program today. However, she declined, and she indicated that she will be more than willing to join us for a future conversation. Of course, the caveat here is that the bill would still have to go through the Senate, I suppose, for a lot of what of the suggestions that Attorney Bristol is making, and hopefully the government is listening to this, and perhaps they can offer some amendments at that stage. But fundamentally, it goes back to the question of the definition of public officers. The current pension scheme as exists, that's the constitutionally guaranteed pension scheme for public officers. Where does that leave that part of it? And Dr. Gilchrist, I'm not too sure if you want to piggyback on anything, or Daisy, anything that
But Dr. Bob, I think it's
Daisy,
perhaps my turn, because
yes, it is. Yes, go ahead.
I want to go back to Dr. Gilchrist, and
yes,
to be very honest, Dr. Gilchrist said a number of things here this morning, which seems to represent the thinking of the administration that is not being said to the public. And I think we should be grateful that on this program this morning, he has been candid enough to admit that the intention is to phase out the manner in which public officers should be properly hired and established, and in effect, undertake constitutional reform. That's a sinister plot that all of us as Grenadians should reject. The other thing I want to say again to Dr. Gilchrist, which you pointed out to him, based on the arguments that the union has been putting forward today and also in the public space for the last year and a half, we are not fundamentally opposed to any pension reform that will benefit workers. So there's no argument there. Dr. Gilchrist again comes back to saying where the conversation ought to be. So what I believe will be happening here after today's program, Dr. Gilchrist is going to be going back to the cabinet, to the administration, and say, I believe that there ought to be more conversation on this bill. And as you have presented it to the public and passed it in Parliament on Wednesday, it cannot go forward and should not go forward. Because by his own acknowledgement here today, he has repeatedly said where the conversation ought to go. And the conversation cannot go anyway if our MPs, if our sitting MPs in Parliament decides to go forward with the fundamentally flawed bill that has been proposed to our country in the Parliament on Wednesday of last week. The union has been saying it. We have taken a barrage of backlash. Personally, I've been accosted in the public space in Grenada, June 29th of this year, for simply saying we must not sit by and allow a pension reform that is going to mire our society in the chaos and the confusion that it has been in for over 40 years because there was a flawed bill that violated the Constitution. This is what the union is saying, that in the interest of social justice, in the interest of peace and harmony of the society, in the interest of fairness, of parity for all workers, any pension reform must follow the parameters that our Constitution sets out, so that we will not come back to a situation where we are sitting in our rocking chairs 30 years from now, 20 years from now, and seeing workers in Grenada, public sector employees, back on the streets with politicians marching behind them. Because let us be clear, when unions were fighting to restore pension rights for public workers that no politician and no political party in this country had the moral fortitude and temerity to do and the guts to do, unions did it. And as I reminded our Attorney General, Sister Claudette Joseph, Minister Claudette Joseph, Senator Claudette Joseph, on Facebook, because she's busy in the Facebook space discussing the pension reform bill. And it's unfortunate that she did not find the time away from Facebook to be present here today to discuss this with us. They were marching behind us while we were fighting for pension rights. These set of politicians, the Prime Minister was not there. He had not yet entered anything, the political fray at all. But we were fighting for those rights. And we cannot sit by as unions and look at those rights that we have restored in the interest of peace and harmony and social justice in this country 2 years later, not even 10 or 20, by an administration who came into office and said, we will regularize workers and we will pay pension. I listened to the words of our Honorable Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell again, just prior to winning the elections in 2022, saying, when and should we win, and when we win, we will pay pensions. Pensions is not a finite thing. You don't pay pensions and you're done with it. So when that promise was made, it was made on the back of the work of unions who restored, and the Court of Grenada, which properly upheld the Constitution of Grenada and restored pensions. So let us ask our Honorable Prime Minister, and let us ask the present administration, when you made those bold claims and declarations to Grenada, and our Prime Minister is a legal mind, he's a lawyer, we're proud of him. When you made those bold declarations to Grenada, that you're going to pay the pension 1958, and that you are going to regularize existing workers who are not regularized and established in the public sector, when you made those bold promises, in effect, you were fooling and attempting to trick the Grenadian people. That's the only conclusion we can come to, because that bold claim was made on the premise of the newly restored 1958 Pension Act and Gratuity Act. Again, from the point of view of the PWU, we are not opposed to reform that ensures that it balances out all the concerns of the society. We have gone that way. We have always gone that way. We have always said, while we would have our esteemed QC, Jimmy Bristol, looking purely at the technicalities and the legalities and the constitutionality of the law, we have always said we are willing to entertain pension in a manner that the society can be comfortable with. But what we will not do, what I, as someone who has already earned my pension and is properly covered, what I will not do while I'm in the chair and I'm in the seat in the PW, I will not sit by and allow an administration that came into office promising to pay pension, promising to regularize workers, to present and pass a flawed bill to the public, to workers, that is forevermore going to create chaos in our society. This is a Christmas season. I said it a couple of days ago. Government and unions, government and the PWU should have been able to stand and smile and shake hands in our parliament in Grenada on Wednesday, because we should have been passing a bill that everybody would have been happy with. We should have been passing a bill that we could have decked out with Christmas garlands to present to the people of Grenada. Rather than that, the government sneaked in a bill on the eve of Christmas, when we're busy, when we're dealing with flood waters. Our union only received notice that this bill was going to be tabled in Parliament on Friday. That was Friday last. So you had Monday, Tuesday for the union to look at that bill and to discuss it. A bill that is going to implicate its members and affect its members. Government of Grenada only sent that bill, that proposed that draft bill to our union on the Friday night. Well, ahead of that bill being tabled on Wednesday. And that's an attempt to sneak into the public space a bill that is flawed, a bill that should not be passed, because fundamentally it is not good for workers and not good for Grenada. In the long run, it will not be good. It will mire our society in controversy and chaos. And I believe government has a responsibility to, one, respect the Constitution of Grenada, and two, respect the unions that represent workers, and two, respect the people of Grenada, and respect public sector employees. That bill does not do that at all.
Well, Ms. Hazard, the government, however, would say that, again, that they were telegraphing to the national community that this bill was going to be tabled before Parliament. In fact, it should have been tabled, I believe, in October. And of course, we saw the Parliament was temporarily prorogued. That did not happen. They had another timeline. And it seems as though they kept delaying it. So the fact that you're surprised that the bill, it came before Parliament now, perhaps should not be something that ought to surprise you, given that they were telegraphing that
I'm not speaking about surprise. I'm speaking about a union. We are not pedestrian to this process. The PWU is not pedestrian to the process or anything that speaks to pension and gratuity of public sector officers in Grenada. We are a direct stakeholder. We ought to have the privilege. We have a responsibility and a right. And if such a bill is going to go before the Parliament, we should have sight of it. I think somebody one of our panelists here today indicated that the Bar Association perhaps received it 2 weeks ahead of time. And that was still not enough time. We are a direct stakeholder. We are not observers to this process. And again, Dr. Bubb, as we have been saying to government, by our letters to government, by our appeals to government, in the public domain and privately to government, we were not satisfied with the draft Pension Act. We were not satisfied with it. And if we're not satisfied with it, and we had very credible and meaningful concerns, those concerns ought to have been given the opportunity to be heard and to be redressed before such a bill went to Parliament. So we're not surprised. We are shocked. We are dismayed. We are very concerned that government is attempting to pass this very flawed bill for the people of Grenada, for public sector workers.
Okay. Dr. Gilchrist, let me bring you back here because, yes, I know that there is a lot that you want to respond to, so I want to give you the opportunity.
But I just want to make some very simple statements, right?
Yes, sir.
And as I listen to Ms. Hazard, I know that most of the executive, or even all, their pension are properly secured. I mean, that's a fact.
That's for the established public servants.
No, yes. I'm referring to the executive of the union, right? I think the executive of the Public Workers Union, I believe they are permanent workers, and I believe their pension are properly secured. Yeah? And as we speak,
thanks to the advocacy of the unions based on the Herman Armstrong ruling, it was because of
my sweat and tears, our marching and tears.
I'm saying,
which the government agreed to pay. This current government, yes, go ahead.
Right, on retirement, Ms. Hassan is properly secured. Yeah, and so most of the union executive. Now, as we speak, we have public workers, people working for government, retiring with only a handshake. As we speak and as we ramble and scrabble over this, they are retiring with nothing as we speak. And I can tell you that the public workers, those who are not established, are anxiously awaiting this bill. They are anxiously awaiting this bill because this bill, and I'm not getting to all the other issues, this bill would on retirement give them at least 85% of the income combined with NS and what the pension is given. So this bill is really a top up to NS. So the simple point I'm making, while we argue about the technicalities, we have people going home with nothing. And I don't think the union get this, I don't think they get it. I want to make the point that all of them are properly secured. We have a group of people going home every day with nothing. The government is attempting to remedy that situation. So let's stay focused. It's all about people. It's not about ourselves. It's all about people. I'm not saying that there may be issues that need to be addressed, but there's an urgency, all right? Not for public employees, quote unquote, to go home without any pension. There's an urgency. We have at least 4,000 workers. That should be the concern. Putting something in place to address that now. But I'm not seeing the emphasis on the urgency on part of the union, those executive members of the union who are properly secured. I'm not seeing that emphasis, and the urgency to address over 4,000 workers working for the government who may retire without anything. I'm not seeing that, and I'm saying let's focus on that and then work back the issues. All right, because that's the ultimate objective. That's really the ultimate aim. You know what are the levels of poverty in Grenada? Are we aware of the poverty rate in Grenada? Are we aware of cost of living in Grenada? And people are retiring into that. We have over 4,000 workers, and it bleeds me that I'm not hearing the emphasis on that, but rather on other issues. At the sacrifice of these people come January, being eligible for some kind of benefit when they retire. So I just want to make that simple point, because at the end of the day, it's all about people. And we have to put aside ego for development of our country. And I'm quoting the Honorable Bristol here. We have to put aside ego. It's not about us. It's about these people who need redress. These people who need some assurance that when they leave the public service or the employer of government, that they have something to top up with NS so that they don't go into poverty. And every day, as we argue and debate, people are retiring with nothing. And I'm concerned about that. Right?
Mr. Bristol wants to make an intervention. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. I mean, it's very difficult for me to sit back and listen to this rhetoric. I'm sorry, Mr. Gilchrist. First, you start off like a politician and not a consultant, right? You start off by trying or saying that the union executive are okay, Jack, so they don't care about the people. Don't do that on this forum. That sort of thing is for politicians. Now, right? The union has never said they don't want the Pension Act, but it's how you do what you want to do. While you are saying, and the government is selling the act on the basis and trying to damage the union at the same time, on the basis that we've got so many thousand or hundred unestablished workers who need this. There's no doubt about that. But why is the government at the same time trying to deprive public officers of their rights under the existing legislation, which are better than this proposed legislation? They're doing that by the way they've crafted Section 3. And some of those, or probably many of those so-called unestablished workers that Mr. Gilchrist is referring to, who we feel so sorry for, are people who should properly benefit from the better existing legislation. And they're depriving many of those 4,000 from the better benefits under the existing legislation by trying to circumvent the provisions of the Constitution. So it's disingenuous, Mr. Gilchrist, to say what you have said. Very disingenuous, because you're not facing the legal reality, which is that the constitutional rights under Section 92 of so-called unestablished, which are probably established if you look at the facts, right? Because you can't put a contract to take away people's rights. Many of those people are probably entitled right now to pension. So it's not this new bill that's giving them pension. They're probably entitled to it as we speak under the existing law. What about them? So the union is fighting for everybody who's entitled under existing legislation to receive that entitlement and to ensure that the new regime applies to new workers coming in, new public officers, which is correct. The Constitution allows for that. Fair enough. And the mechanics and so forth and nitty-gritty to be worked out. That's not a problem. The problem is these so-called unestablished or contract workers. That is the problem. A new pension law is not a problem. It's welcome. The government has to do it. Because, as Mr. Gilchrist said, it's not fiscally responsible to carry on as we are. We're going to bust. But you've got to get the right people within its framework.
And that's fine.
That's not happening because a lot of people are going in here who's supposed to be under the existing regime and who are entitled to pension as we speak. We didn't know no law to pass for it. Some of those 4,000, I am pretty sure the majority of those 4,000 are entitled to pension under the existing legislation. And why they're trying to do it is because of the money aspect. But you have, as I said earlier, that's your responsibility. You know what, as Attorney General, I had to obey the order of the court to have the Grenada 18 released. What did I do? I went around town and made excuses. I had a duty, and I did it. Okay? And it was a tremendous burden on me from the point of view. It was very emotional, and it was a milestone in the history of Grenada. Very responsible. I didn't shirk from it. I did it. Okay? So the government should not shirk from this responsibility, but should carry out their obligations. It's simple as that. I don't know why. The money is not the minister's money. It's our taxpayers' money. Why are they're skirting around it when we have to find money to travel or to do this or to do all sorts of fancy things? 200 million on an airport that we can't see the benefit of, right? They find it. But when there's a few people's precious pension to see them through their old age, it took several court cases, culminating in the last one, to get any government to stand up and listen. As Daisy said, even the NDC, when I was at AG, because it didn't raise its head, I must say that, otherwise I would have dealt with it, but it ignored the McQueen judgment and carried on not paying pension. Had the governments been paying pension from day one, they wouldn't have had this backlog how many million this government had to pay to bring everybody up to date, they wouldn't have had it. But governments think they can get away with everything because enforcement against the government is not easy. Okay? All right? It's not easy. So we need to be truthful. All right? We need to be truthful. And there's a lack of truth in how this is being presented. It's very easy to fix Section 3. You just delete a couple of the subsections and you delete in its entirety, which will mean you could delete in its entirety subsection 3, and then we're home. All right? It's so easy. Stroke of a pen. It could be done.
So
it could be done.
Outside stroke of a pen, as the Prime Minister said, a stroke of a pen. I don't know where that pen.
Well, I didn't realize you said that, but I'm saying
he did say that. He did say that.
Okay, sorry.
I don't know if that pen.
I'm not adopting it. I'm just saying it.
Dr. Gilchrist, anything else you wish to add here to what Attorney Bristol articulated here? Again, the fundamental issue here seems to be, well, why can't we get these workers under the established pension scheme that the Constitution speaks to? That, in fact, the entire Hermelin-Armstrong case, the argument for the Hermelin-Armstrong case was built on, that entire Section 92, I believe. Yes, Attorney Bristol, of the Constitution.
The last case we did for the union, all the unions, we had a class action suit, which we won, and that was the one that led to the payment of pensions.
Yeah, and so the question is, I do know, Gilchrist, that the government does have a regularization process where they're attempting to get these contract for service employees under the establishment. And so that is a question that I asked before. How does this particular legislation fit into the remit of the regularization that is currently happening, right? And why is there a need for this particular legislation when, in fact, perhaps one might have to wait for the entire issue of the established pension scheme to be addressed?
Well,
again, I'm not an expert on this. I'm just asking questions.
Yes. I know you had a PS.
Marshall. Yes, from DPA. Yes,
and she spoke to that. The whole deregulation process would continue, and what's going on with the pension. So I know that she would have spoken to that. And of course, what you don't want is to continue to grow, right? The public workers under the existing system. You said that is unsustainable. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
We said that,
and I think everyone agrees with that.
Everyone agrees with that. Of course. I mean, if I follow Jim, Mr. Bristol argument, of course, one way of looking at the existing system maybe is to reform it without introducing a new system, right? Okay. That approach was not taken into account.
No, that can't be. You can't do that because
you can't do that based on fine. So you can't touch it. But I just want to say that if you compare both schemes, right, of both pensions, the proposed one, the new one that is proposed, offers benefits that are not contained in the existing one, right? So there are some benefits there that are attractive, and even in the bill, I believe that there's an option if you are enjoying if you are in an existing program on an existing pension scheme, you could opt to join the new scheme. So I'm saying there are benefits there that are very attractive, and a lot of the dynamics of the labor market now, young people are saying, look, they don't want to work with government all the days of their life. They want to be able to move, all right? They want mobility in the job market, and at the same time, we are offering them an option where, with mobility, to get experience, and mobility brings job stability in a sense and certainty. You carry a pension with you, and we say the new pension as proposed is portable. You can move with it, and you don't lose it. The existing one is not like that. Yeah, if you are in a public service, conformed, and decide to retire, move on, those years, you lose those years. Under a new arrangement, that would not happen. So I'm saying there are benefits, and I would have liked to have had, and it's not too late to have a discussion on those kind of parameters and comparison, and so that will ensure that under the new arrangement, workers are not worse off. and they are better off. So that's why I said that's where the conversation should have been. I mean, the Senate will be meeting, I believe, on the 27th, and there's an opportunity again, as the minister representing the bill, to have further discussion and dialogue. And we look forward to meaningful dialogue and to ensure that what will emerge will be a bill that has consensus by our stakeholders. Let's hope that's a final outcome. So, I mean, even the program this morning, I'm very happy we're having this conversation. I'm very happy. Yeah.
Well, let's see what happens because, this is, of course, as Sister Daisy said, it's the height of the Christmas season. Who has appetite for consultation? Perhaps people might have more appetite for ham and sorrel and ginger beer and black cake.
That comes from having money. It all boils back to money. Yeah? Boils back to money and resources to be able to spend on Christmas. And those will be spending their pension. Those are getting pension on Christmas time.
Yes, Attorney Bristol, yes.
It's not about money. Money, as I said at the beginning, cannot trump the Constitution. Okay? Money and the ability to pay. When government has a judgment against it, the very Privy Council says, make the Minister of Finance sign the warrant and jail him if you don't sign it. Okay? You have to meet your constitutional obligations. Full stop. Otherwise, don't come into government. It's so simple. Let somebody with some more cojones come in and deal with the matter. It's not your money. It's my money. It's all these workers, taxpayers' money. Let's put it to good use by honoring our obligations. We want constitutional reform. We don't even honor the present constitution. Yes, we want constitutional reform. Yeah? It's like learning to drive. You just get a little car before you turn around, you want a Rolls Royce. You can't drive the car you have. You know what I mean? Take your time. Oh gosh, it's simple. It's what we call common sense. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well said.
Yes, Attorney Bristol, would this particular legislation run afoul of the Hermelin-Armstrong? Of course, I know that you are not the attorney in the Hermelin-Armstrong case, but the Hermelin-Armstrong case was very clear. The judgment was very clear in respect of how government should honor obligations for pensioners.
No, look, the pensions, and that's why the government, because of the last ruling of the court with all the unions, so the government honored the obligation to pay a pension. The problem is whom is to be included within the ambit of the existing legislation. That is the question. Because, as I said, previous administrations excluded a lot of people because of the so-called contract and legal gymnastics to keep people out so they could reduce their obligations. But the correct way to do it is to recognize people who are truly public officers as defined in the Constitution, have them in, because that's what the Constitution says. And then those new ones, as this bill is, this new legislation, it starts from the day the law comes in if you join after, and that is provided for in the Constitution. That's 100%. But do not try and straddle it and muddy the waters by not honoring your current obligations. It's as simple as that. There's enough case law from the Privy Council and our Court of Appeal on what constitutes a public officer, okay, and what is the role of the Public Service Commission. It's nothing new, and I know Attorney General is well versed in it, and I think we should move away from the political aspect of it and get into the legal aspect, okay? Because at the end of the day, you will reap true benefits for the government as well as the people.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is such an important issue, and of course, as I said before we went live, that the Bubb Report, we are dealing with the issues, the issues affecting the national community right down to the end of the year. And of course, it would not have been appropriate of me to end the year without having to deal with this very important issue, because of course the Senate meeting comes up next week Friday. I await to see whether or not Attorney Bristol's suggestions, the union suggestions, as Dr. Gilchrist said, perhaps that there might be a look at that particular section of the legislation to see How it may be amended in the upper house, we don't know, but certainly there would be other questions remaining. And ladies and gentlemen, I would now give you an opportunity for closing comments. I would start with you, Sister Daisy.
Dr. Bubb, before I give closing comments,
yes,
you would allow me to go back, because when I agreed to come onto your program, I agreed to come onto your program because your program carries a certain stature and reputation. Late yesterday evening, I asked you, who are the fellow panelists? Because that's important to me.
Yes.
This morning on your program, I was abused by your guest, Dr. Colin Gilchrist. Rather than speaking to the substance of the ideas and the thoughts that we are discussing here today, as a man of his purported stature, academic qualification should be doing, when Dr. Colin Gilchrist could not refute my very real claims, thoughts, and ideas, he resorted to abusing me and attacking me personally, my motives and my intentions. That was very unworthy of him. That was very low of him. And I believe an apology is owed to me. To say that my motives as a trade unionist are rooted in ego and personal whatever, that is so fundamentally wrong. I could walk away today. Any member of our executive can walk away today and leave this pension fight, because as he said, and as I said before, I'm covered. I don't need this fight for myself. This fight is for Grenada. This fight is for generations of public sector workers, just as it was in 2022. It is unfortunate that today, the same ugly arguments, the same arguments that the NNP administration used that saw workers' salaries being docked in 2018 and all the protests that we had to engage in 2019, those same ugly arguments are being used now by Dr. Colin Gilchrist to support a bill that should not stand. And I'm very challenged by that this morning, because I did not expect to undergo a personal attack like that on your program from your guest. I have a very thick skin as a trade unionist. I'm used to being attacked in the worst manners presently. I'm used to being threatened with violence and all manner of things. But I did not expect that to hear today from Dr. Colin Gilchrist. And that's unworthy of you. And it's very, very unworthy of any representative of this administration to bring back the old ugly arguments that the previous administration used and which this country rejected, fully supported by the NDC as a party. All of those arguments were rejected. Why today now are we coming back to claim them and to love them up and to say to the public, all of these arguments are worthy, has merit, and should stand? When we voted out an administration out of office, the previous administration was voted out of office on the back of pension and gratuity. That was the premise for that election in 2022. So it's really sad and unfortunate that today those old ugly arguments should be used. But let me get to my closing arguments. Again, as we come into the Christmas, as we celebrate the Christmas season, this bill that is proposed should be a bill that all of us can rejoice over. Should be a bill that respects the Constitution of Grenada, because without a Constitution, there's no Grenada. This bill should respect the laws of Grenada. Dr. Gilchrist said that workers are going to be going home in January of 2025 with no pension. There is no reason for them to go home in 2025 with no pension. There is a pension act that is in place to provide a pension for every public sector employee. And the laws of Grenada, the Labor Code of Grenada, tells us who a public sector employee. So if a worker goes home in 2025 without a pension and has labored with the government and people of Grenada for decades, but they have a letter that says that they're contract or they're independent, and this administration chooses to allow them to go home without a pension and gratuity, it means that one, they are violating the laws of Grenada, and they are choosing to not pay these workers a pension, not the union. And so no worker in the public sector should be going home after 2022 without a pension and gratuity, because the law provides for that. Unions did the hard work to put that back on the table. This NDC administration came into office on the promise that they will pay pensions. Pensions have to be paid into perpetuity. It was not a transient thing. It was not something of the moment. It was not something for political victory. It was something for the well-being of Grenadians. It was something for the establishment of peace and harmony in our society. And it is very sad and very unfortunate that after all of that hard work, and after all those years of struggle, and after all the promises that this administration has made to the Grenadian people, that we are back here today again discussing pension and gratuity. Let us do better. Let us do better for our country. Let us do better for our nation. The nation state of Grenada is not for 2024 or for 2022. The nation state of Grenada will continue as long as God allows it. And we have a responsibility, those of us who are here now, to ensure that we do right by our constitution and that we do right by the nation of Grenada. God bless Grenada. God bless Grenada. God bless all of us citizens. Have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Sister Daisy. On that note, I also want to bring in Dr. Gilchrist. Dr. Gilchrist, Ms.
Who owes me an apology.
Is saying that she was a bit taken aback by your rhetoric, some parts of your rhetoric this morning. Is there anything you wish to say for yourself? She's asking for an apology.
Well, I understand, and it was not my intention to abuse. So I mean, I have a lot of respect for her. So if
Miss Hazard,
Mrs. Hazard,
I've been referring to you all morning as Dr. Gilchrist. I am Miss Hazard.
Miss Hazard. So if my words are uttering offend you, I apologize for that. It's not my intention. It's not my character and personality to do that. Okay, so if you feel if that is so, then I mean I'm big enough to say I'm sorry for causing that harm that you have felt, especially as we are on Christmas time. So I mean I just want to put it on the table.
Yes.
Yeah. So Ms. Hazard, I notice you are still serious.
Yes, sir.
Well, it certainly is a serious issue. But Dr. Gilchrist, I'll go over to you now for as moving forward, taking on the suggestions, the constitutional and legal suggestions offered by Attorney Bristol, and of course with the caveat that perhaps the administration may listen to this program and listen to the suggestions. I mean, the Bubb Report, the humble Bubb Report, and let's see what happens in the Senate.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So having said that to Miss Hazard, I in terms of my closing statement, simply put, this is a very important piece of legislation initiative by the government. We do have the Senate next week, so then another opportunity, right, to look at the bill clause by clause, objectives, targets, intentions, and what it bill proposed to achieve. And I believe there were good points made on this program, and I believe there is always room for improvement. So let's look forward to what happens next Friday. I mean, at the end of the day, all of us want what's best for people. All of us want what's best for those who work for government. I used to be a government employee myself. Yeah. So
I believe you are part of the union. Were you not part of the Public Workers Union as well, sir? Or am I subject to correction there?
No, not me. That was my brother. Not me.
Oh, that was your brother. Okay, all right.
Yeah, not me. So I believe in good spirit, I think we could there is always opportunity to improve what is being proposed, and I'm in the interest of the public officer. So let's hope goodwill prevail as we go forward. And Ms. Hazard, I want to take this opportunity to wish you a pleasant, wonderful Christmas. The best Christmas you can ever have. I wish that for you.
I'll come by for ham and cake.
Yeah.
and sprinkle some ice cream there as well.
And to you as well.
And of course, Attorney Bristol, sir, over to you for some closing comments. It's always a pleasure having you on the Bubb Report, sir.
Thank you. Well, I haven't been on because I don't say much these days, but
yes,
this warranted, and I thank you for the invitation because my duty has always been to see the right thing done. I have no iron in the fire. I never have had. And I'm appealing to the government. I really am, truly appealing to the government. There's a golden opportunity, as Dr. Gilchrist said. This is a very important bit of legislation. It is. And therefore it should be accorded the scrutiny, and people should, as wide a consultation as possible. I think the consultation in general has taken place, but the worrying constitutional point to which I've referred all morning. And it is an easy solution. If they ask me, I can do it in 5 minutes, and that will cure that problem. And I really hope for Grenada that the government's stated intentions to so-called regularize these workers, in fact, comes to pass. Because, if this law is passed, those irregular or contract workers, according to the law, they haven't got a leg on which to stand. So they've got to go in first, you see, or at least there's got to be an undertaking. The senator list that all these people are considered, pending formalities, part of the existing public service, okay, and pensionable under 92. You've got to do something like that if you want to get the legislation done in this sitting. Fair enough, but there's got to be something like that. And I'm only appealing because it's the right thing to do, and I hope that my message is taken in the right light. So with that, I wish everybody a peaceful Christmas. Let's not forget the Christ in Christmas, and all the very best, not just for the new year, but beyond, because we say we've done 50 years, but we got another 50 coming if we play our cards right. So all the very best. Dr. Gilchrist, Ms. Hazard, Dr. Bubb, all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so much, Russ. And of course, a Merry Christmas to all of you, and may you enjoy this merry time of year. Panel, thank you so much again for appearing on the Bubb Report this week. Viewers and listeners, this has been another episode of the Bubb Report, our final episode of the year. Next week's edition of the Bubb Report would entail a year in review, where we will recap some of the major stories animating discourse, animating life in Grenada and the Caribbean, of course, over the last 12 months. So stay tuned for that year in review program next year. But of course, this was our last panel segment for the year. And I want to take this time to sincerely thank all of our panelists for making the Bubb Report possible. I also want to thank our valuable audience, for without you, the Bubb Report will also not be possible, as well as of our hardworking producers who work every week to ensure that we're able to bring you a quality program like no other for the national community of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. And on behalf of myself and my family, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, wishing everyone a happy and merry holiday season. And we will see you next year for other live episodes of the Bubb Report. Take care. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.